For this first project, I am making a sign. They're very good sellers at our booth. We had quite a bit of 1/4 inch plywood left over from projects, and so that's what I'm using for the signage right now. I have painted it with one coat only of some chalk paint, and then I sanded and wiped off the dust with a wet rag. Now, to distress, sometimes you can just sand, but with this flat plywood, it was easier to wet distress, and I was just trying to bring back some of that natural wood color in just a few spots.
If you've never heard of Iron Orchid Designs, then I'm going to make your day today if you love doing crafts, because they are an unbelievably fabulous company. They make several things. They make an air dry clay, they make molds, they make transfers, they have ink, and they have stamps. Today, I'm going to be using one of their transfers. Now, when they started out, they made their transfers and shipped them in these tubes. And I'm not exactly sure when that changed. They may still ship them in tubes for the big ones, because the one I'm using today is a little bit on the large side. It's 14.25 inches by 24 inches. Now, instead of the tubes, they come like this in these little flip packets. Now this one I've already opened, but you can see I've cut out and used some things. Sometimes there's 4 sheets, like this one's 4 sheets, but this one is 8 sheets, and I've used a lot of it. Gorgeous, just gorgeous transfers, and they look like hand paintings by the time you're finished. This one is 4 sheets, and I can't wait to use it. The peacock. So this would be the left, this would be the right. Here's the rest of the peacock. And the right bottom. You don't have to use all of it. You can cut apart and use just pieces, which I have also done on various projects. And each of your transfers comes with this little plastic tool that I'll show you in a minute exactly how you use it. Don't throw those out. They're good little paint stirrers too.
At this point, I have peeled the backing off and have laid down the transfer. It comes with this little plastic stick for rubbing the transfer onto your surface. So here I am just making sure all of the bubbles are out and it's smooth. And now we get started. And you rub, and you rub. Now the interesting thing about these transfers is that you'll notice that the color, once it starts to grab to the surface, changes. Can you see it there on that M? There we go. And you can also do something called ride the wave. Here I'm picking up the transfer material and kind of carefully creating a little bubble. So watch closely. Look at the bottom of the M here in a second. It's going to, there we go. See how it grabbed to the surface. So that's what you do. You continue to rub and rub and rub. Now, this 35 minutes it took me to transfer is now fast forwarded into 1 minute. Yes, it takes a long time, and you have to be careful. Carefully lift up and see if there's any part of the transfer that's not sticking. Go back, rub it again. It does take a while, but the time you put into it is worth it for these beautiful transfers that give you a hand-painted look. The transfer is completely on there. Now what you want to do is rub it with your hands a little bit, make sure everything is down without any little bubbles. And then I'm using a worn out sanding sponge there to lightly go over and distress it just a little bit more. This Rust-Oleum chalked matte clear protective top coat. That's what I like to use on a lot of stuff because it dries quickly and it's fast. Now it's Randy's turn. Using some old barn wood that he cut down and cut a groove, a 1/4 inch groove in, he is making me a frame for this beautiful sign. Ideally, it would have been better if I had painted the back of the sign prior to Randy getting the frame on, but you know, you do what the hubby wants to do. He was ready to put the frame on, so I did not argue. So here I am just using some cheaper chalk paint, the Folk Art in a gray, for the back of the sign. For most of the signs and shelving that we make, I use these sawtooth hangers. They're easy because all you have to do is hammer them in and they'll hold quite a bit of weight. So for the most part, that is what I use.
I will link Iron Orchid Designs website in the description box below. This next sign is also a really fun one. I'm using decoupage paper. That's kind of come really back in style now because the papers they make are just so beautiful. They're thinner, much thinner than like wallpaper, and they have beautiful designs. This one that I'm about to use is actually a Dixie Belle paint rice paper, and it is called Palette Wood Pattern. I have 3 in the package and I'm going to be using 2 on the back of the sign.
There are usually transparent elements to decoupage paper, so normally you want to start with a white or light colored background, which I did here, sanded the board smooth. Now with the Dixie Belle decoupage paper, even though they do match side to side, they have a white frame around them. So the first thing that I had to do was to trim the edges of the paper. There are a number of options of products you can use to actually glue, quote unquote, down the paper. I am using Amy Howard's matte sealer because it's what I have and it's matte. A lot of people use Mod Podge, which I use on small projects, but not on something like this because I want to make sure that I don't get any wrinkles at all. Now when I apply decoupage paper, I start at one edge and I'm only going to go maybe a couple of inches because I want to get the paper aligned first, and that can take a little bit of finesse. The other reason to use a sealer like this, DIY also makes a product that you can use, but using the sealer, and especially using these quality decoupage papers, you actually have a little work time to get it in position. Now here I'm just rubbing down the bubbles, flipping the paper back now, and continuing the process. At this point, I'm getting a tool IOD makes. It's called a brayer, B-A-Y-E-R. Oops, I had a little dried clay on there that I had used my brayer to roll out some air dry clay. But I'm carefully using this smooth brayer to get out the wrinkles. You're going to find that it will stretch a little bit, but as it dries, those wrinkles usually come right back out, and I had no trouble whatsoever. Doing the same thing with the other piece of paper. Here I'm trimming the edges. There's a couple of methods. You can just wet the edge and then sand, but I found if you leave it dry and then sand, it actually comes off the edges easier, because I didn't trim but 3 sides of the paper. The next step, as you see I'm doing here, is to go back over your decoupage paper with more sealer. Projects don't always go as smoothly as one would like them to. Sometimes you have a bugaboo and you gotta sit and think on it a while, see if you can figure it out. Maybe drink a cup of coffee and it'll clear your mind. So, let's see if I can salvage this. So, here's the dilemma. Your ideas don't always work. My ideas don't always work. I love this font, but it's extremely tiny. And there was no way that I could pick out the what is black now. There was no way I could remove that and leave the tiny lettering. You saw what a mess it did. So I had to recut. In hindsight, it probably would have been better to have used a thicker font than this one, but I do like it. The other tricky issue is that the vinyl that I used is not the removable kind. It's supposed to be the permanent kind. So that could be an issue, getting the black off later without pulling something. Although, remember, this does have a sealer on it. And the third decision to make is, because this font is so small, is it going to show up on this? Because this has got, I mean, it's not loud, but if I want to use this, I'm honestly thinking I need to lighten this. This is barnwood paper. It might look good anyway to do kind of like a white-ish paint wash. So I think that's what I'm going to mix up here. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Got my wash water here that had just white in it to begin with. So I'm going to mix about equal parts of paint and water. Now, if I don't like this, I should be able to wipe it off pretty quickly since it has a sealer on it. I like these blue shop towels for wiping. And I think I'm just going to use a chip brush, because I don't need it to be real wonderful here. So let's just do a little bit. And that does lighten it.
So I think that's going to be the ticket. So I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to take it outside and spray it with a matte sealer, and I'll show you what that is that I like to use. Then we'll do the stencil.
As I showed earlier, I'm again using Rust-Oleum Chalked Matte Clear. I find this at Home Depot and sometimes at Walmart. The purpose of spraying it is in order to kind of protect the chalk paint wash that I just did, because this vinyl could potentially pull up that layer. It also provides an extra layer of protection for the decoupage paper. Now here I'm applying my stencil. Now there's a couple things about stenciling through. You don't want bleed through, and there are a few techniques you can use to try to prevent that, but none of the techniques I normally use would work in this case, because the center of all of the A's and all of the E's did not stick to when I transferred, so I had to try something else. The first thing I tried, as you can see there, was a permanent marker. A paint pen would have been the best, but I didn't have one. So I started with the permanent marker, and it wasn't real black, so then I had to go back over it, hand painting it.
As always, thanks for watching, and please subscribe. Bye, keep looking up, and have a good one.